Hey everyone, it's Jamie from Independent Street NOLA and Seasons and Ritual, and I'm here to talk about the full moon in Capricorn that will be happening tomorrow on July 10th. I'm recording this on July 9th. I believe she will be at her peak around 4:30 or so in the afternoon, Central Standard Time. I think, not 100% sure. So let's get into it. So when we have a full moon, that means the sun and the moon are opposite of each other. So our divine masculine, which is the sun, and our divine feminine are in opposite signs. So right now the sun is in Cancer and the moon is in Capricorn. So that's a two cardinal signs. Cancer is water, cardinal water, and then Capricorn is cardinal earth. So the moon will be reflecting the sun off herself, and that's how we get the full moon. So, what is coming in on this full moon for me is the idea of what do we want to work on now? And you might not think that's a bit of a stretch because Capricorn is the sign of work. But what's interesting is this theme of what do we want to work on now? I was going through where the other planets are, and everyone seems to be at very early stages of new planets, new positions, if you will. So I was looking at everyone who's retrograde, and Pluto is retrograde at 2 degrees of Aquarius, which is fixed water. Neptune is retrograde at 2 degrees of Aries, which is cardinal fire. And then Black Moon Lilith is retrograde of 4 degrees of Scorpio, which is fixed water. So we have all these planets in this new age of Aquarius. Pluto is just now moved into, I mean, Pluto's been in Aquarius not that long. Neptune has just been in Aries for not that long. And then we have Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, and she's only at 4 degrees. So it's these new degree points that we are going back over in fixed signs and in cardinal signs. And then in our mutable signs, Gemini is still at 0 degrees of Uranus is still at 0 degrees of Gemini in that mutable air. Venus is in there. She's in conjunction with Uranus at only 5 degrees, so we're at young spots. Um, Jupiter is in Cancer, only at 6 degrees. That's still young. Um, when I say young, that's how I read these. That's how I read these degrees. So these, 0 to 5, even to 6, to me is that page energy in the tarot. So, and then we have Mars at 12 degrees of Virgo. So he's like in his teenage years in Virgo. So he should be feeling pretty good. So at the time of the full moon, the only people we have at degrees of mastery, I think that, 25 to 30 part of the sign is degrees of mastery, is Chiron and Eris. And they are hanging out at 26 and 25 degrees of Aries, respectively. So we have all this new energy coming in for this full moon. And I think the full moon is going to be in 17 degrees, so of Capricorn, 8, 17, 18 degrees. So again, older teenage years, right? And then the two people we have hanging out at degrees of mastery is Eris, which is discord, and then Chiron, which is that great healer, both in the sign of Aries. And Aries is the self. Aries is that I am presence. And these are at points where they are learning and realizing things about themselves and others and what to do about it to make things work easier for the self and for the world. And it is it's not a tricky spot if you are paying attention. But it can be a tricky spot if you haven't been paying attention. And I'm going to touch a little bit on spirituality right now and this idea of the age of Pisces, how we really kind of crap the bed on spirituality, and then Neptune moving into Aries, and how it is to bring in this idea of spirituality and how to find the self and how one defines the self in finding their own spiritual meaning. And we're going to be going over this it's going to be pretty much in our face, especially with Chiron being at that degrees of 26 degrees and then Eris being at 25 degrees in Aries, because Um, when we talk about like love thy neighbor and things like there's that idea of spirituality, but there's also that idea of spirituality of showing up and hoping to get something in return. And this is where I think this discord is going to be coming in with with the idea of how we see ourselves as being spiritual and what it means to be spiritual to the self and what kind of and what that brings that in. If it's a sense of peace, if it's a sense of energy, if it's a sense of love, and not in this idea of a sense of the reward. And how we're going to start talking about that and how we're going to start working on that moving forward. And it's not it's not hard to talk about in the sense of always learning and being in a place of regulating, one's nervous system and understanding that there is enough love to go around. Because we've been doing the talk and doing the walk and healing ourselves and sitting in these practices of meditation, for lack of a better word, but it's also like realizing the value of the self, right? Um, and how that makes one feel. And if you tie that to the idea of spirituality, what does that mean moving forward versus if you show up in service to yourself and then you're able to show up in service in others, right? And so this full moon, Capricorn, right, shining a spotlight on how how people were using that idea of spirituality in different ways that we can see that profits them. And I mean, there's obviously some blazing examples of that, right? Um, you can see that anywhere for forever, quite honestly, not just now. The difference is being in this age of Aquarius where it comes back to the self and the individual first, and finding that peace and what that does to you and how you're able to then put it out into your community. So that is there's one little thing that I think we're going to be working on. I think that's one thing that's going to be coming up, um, especially in the face of these flooding tragedies, what it means to help thy neighbor, um, and what it means to be able to come into a place spiritually, um, and doing things from your heart space and not because you want and I'm not laughing like to make fun of people at all, but just your just rewards in heaven or your just rewards in the afterlife, and the idea of bringing that into the present and into the now. So I think that is one thing we're going to be working on. Um, again, going over these young degrees, right? The planets that are retrograding back over these young degrees, we're going to start seeing um, when we retrograde, we go over the things that we read the fine print, right? And so because Neptune has turned retrograde in Aries, and Neptune deals with spirituality, um, that idea of in Aries is that self, that cardinal sign, and that fire of dealing with, how do I put the inspiration out there if the idea is being spiritual in the world now and not later. So kind of working on that theme, however this translates to you, um, as well as being a good steward, right? A good leader. And even if the being a good steward and a good leader is the idea that you limit your screen time and you know, keep the trash picked up on your block or something like that. It is this idea of doing things in the present, in the now. Because Capricorn is an earth sign, and earth signs, and unless you ask a Virgo, earth signs, well, all signs need to be present, but earth signs should be present because they're supposed to be grounded And to me, that is the here and the now. The more we can stay grounded in the here and the now, the easier it is to manifest the future. So bringing this full moon and what do we want to work on, the here and the now. This idea of Gemini, who's just at 0 degrees, or Uranus, who's moved into Gemini. Uranus has moved into Gemini just at 0 degrees, right? That karmic turning point. Um, what are the things that we're letting go of, for freedom, air signs? Gemini is mutable air. What's the freedom, right? Um, and how are we going to work on that now? And I was talking with my moon school group the other day with this idea of freedom coming in, the idea of what are we working on now, and the idea of, when things leave and fall behind, a lot of times we have this huge urge on what feels familiar. And there is nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong. Like this feels really familiar. And it was brought to my attention this idea of just because something feels familiar doesn't necessarily means it was the best for us or it's the best way to move forward. Um, just because it was quote unquote, and I say the word easy, and I don't mean this in the sense that, okay, if it's not easy, then it's a struggle, okay, especially with Gemini, which is known to be in duality. But just because it was familiar, doesn't mean it was easy. And if it was easy, okay, like I'm just going to sit here and let it coast. But if you're not getting the result that you always wanted, then maybe we don't need to stay in the familiar. And it's okay to also see the unfamiliar, and we can tell ourselves it's safe, even though it's unfamiliar. It's safe. Because this is giving me the canvas in order to create what it is that I want instead of this idea of, oh, well, it's familiar, so therefore it's safe. When a lot of times things that are familiar aren't safe, they're just familiar. And so working on that idea as well of, yes, this is familiar, but is it safe? Yes, this is familiar, but is it giving me the results that I want? And the answers there could also be yes, right? Be yes, not BS. I don't know if that came out correctly or not. Um, but also using this full moon to highlight it's okay if things aren't familiar. It's okay to feel safe where things aren't familiar. It's okay, even if it feels uncomfortable, to feel safe in that, right? Um, because it is this idea of starting something new, working on something new, working in something in a different way. And this full moon highlighting that. The sun being in Cancer, it's giving us a hard effing look at our homes, right? What we see as a home, how we treat others in our home. Um, and if that home were to get, you know, washed away or people are left with nothing, how would you want to be treated in that home, in that time, in that space? And then seeing if that is percolating out to the rest of what's going on, especially at a personal level. This isn't a time, I don't think, to get overwhelmed by world news, right? Which we can very easily. Capricorn does want to work on things. So how can we bring it in, right? To the self. Gemini is hosting Venus, which is a personal planet. She's only at 5 degrees, so she's in conjunction with Uranus. So how are we talking about things differently, right? That Page of Swords. Um, Mars being at 12 degrees, Mars, the personal planet of Virgo. You know what, you guys, I didn't see where Mercury was. Oh well. Next time, Mercs. Sorry about that. Um, 12 degrees, right? Feeling a little more sure of himself on how to move forward, right? Because Virgo is also Earth. Virgo wants to start resolving things. So Venus is still figuring out, talking about it, but Mars is getting that confidence that, okay, I can find a way to move us through this and resolve some of these things. So the full moon. in Capricorn is bringing in a lot of this young energy, a lot of us looking at what do we want to work on next? How do we want to work on it? We can't escape this idea of not working on our home. And I mean that as community, self, home, uh, world home, right? Make it as big as small as you want. And this was coming up a lot too, and I don't know if I can weave this into the full moon, but it's really important for everyone to know, and I do believe this, that you cannot outrun your karma. And I don't mean that in a bad way or a scary way. You've really got to pay attention and look at what you're doing. You're right, we always use the word intentional. How am I being intentional today? And so I want everyone to know that, especially in the Americas, or the United States, we kind of have this narrative that people escape justice or people, you know, they don't and they won't. And it doesn't mean that we're going to see everyone get their day in court, right? And this isn't about the, what files. This is more about like people voting on things that aren't going to help the greater good. Um, you know, you don't escape this. You don't outrun this. There's not enough money that can get you out of this, right? There's not enough Hail Marys that you can say that is going to soothe that soothe that your conscience, baby, basically, and that I guess that kind of goes back into this idea of spirituality and how you see yourself as spiritual and what that means to you. Um, you just can't outrun it, right? We are still humans on a 3D Earth, right? And we just can't. Like we all start here and then we end here. And what we do in between, what we want to work on, right, is up to us. So this idea that, you can do a bunch of terrible things to people and then go live on an island in Fiji and just be fine. That's not the way the world works anymore. Maybe at one time, but the veil is too thin. We're in a new energy. Um, we can't unsee things. They can keep trying to say, like, that's not really what you saw. But if you were there and you saw it, you know what you saw, you know what you heard. Um, and as a collective, with everyone waking up, right, especially or like getting back online, if you will, especially in these young degrees, right? It's hard to, and we're bringing in that old knowledge or how we used to do things, right? And that comes in with that, how I was talking about the familiar, but seeing what it is that we want to bring in, what we want to work on to make things new and different. And at this crossroad, it's too young and too fresh and too electric to rewrite everything quick enough, right? There's this is why we have different generations of people and we speak to different cultures and these things because we're weaving in this new energy. And as we watch that old energy fade, we've got to decide what is it that I want to work on. And let me just say this too. If you're doing something and you're feeling kind of bummed out and you like the familiar, that's okay. That's okay. It's not like you're failing the mission of the world or the mission of the earth. The idea is always to be present and be aware of what you're feeling. And, I like to go lay in my bed because it's familiar, right? I love my covers because it's familiar. That's where I feel safe, right? It's this idea of being present and knowing that, right? And being present, like, do I want to bring this storyline forward though, even though it's familiar? Ooh, even though people suffered at it. Okay, I don't think so. Understanding it, taking accountability of, wait, I kind of want to move things forward. And it's okay to have nostalgia and it's okay to, feel those things. And a lot of this is going to be coming up super high because all these planets are retrograde and Saturn's going to retrograde here pretty soon, right? Um, I don't know, I wouldn't call them the good old days, but if you're having that and you're like, God, I really miss that. At the same time, though, I'm supposed to be really excited for the pu future and I want to be bringing things on. Uranus and Gemini, right? Gemini is going to be throwing all these different scenarios at us. Uranus is going to start just pew, 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 blowing them up. Nah, I shouldn't use that word, but not even shooting them down, but just bringing them to us. Uranus like lightning strikes. Okay, like what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And it's okay to say, man, I really liked how that felt, and I really wish I was still in that energy. At the same time, I am ready for new things to happen. I don't really want to live that out again, you know? Um, Things can be layered, right? I think the main thing is that you recognize really where it is that where you want to go, really what it is that you want to change. And if you want to bring that idea of familiarity, especially if you feel like especially if you're lumping in the idea of safety with familiarity, right? So maybe just making that distinction. I liked it this way because I felt safe and I want to bring that feeling of being safe moving forward. So allow me to see what it feels like um, to be safe and to bring in new ideas, new ways of being, new ways of speaking, new ways of listening, new ways of showing up, but still allowing me to feel safe. And if that idea is that wasn't safe, then allow me to feel what it actually means to be safe now, right? In the present, in this day and age. Okay, so what do we want to work on? Let's see. Let's grab a card. All right. Four cups, baby. Okay. This is really good. This is perfect. Four cups. So what do we want to work on? Okay, so cups again is water. Cups is manifestation. Cups is creativity, right? And what we're working on is realizing the universe is giving us what we focus on. And if we keep focusing on that everything is empty, everything is broken, everything is outside of my reach, then that's what we're going to keep perpetuating. It is time to get focused. It's time to work on and this that full moon in Cancer and that full moon in Capricorn. Capricorn is so happy right now because Capricorn gets to work, right? And you have to remember Capricorn is the sea goat. So it knows how to navigate sea and it knows water, okay? And it knows how to navigate land. And so the fact that Capricorn can bring in feelings and emotions along with practicality, just getting its little hooves dirty, um, and having a good time, it's happy. The goat is happy. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be hopeless. It doesn't have to be, um, who was it? Not Atlas. Who was the one that had to keep rolling the hill up, rolling the ball, and it kept coming back down, right? It doesn't have to be any of those things. It could just be as simply as starting to pay attention to what it is that you're thinking about, what it is that you hold in your heart space, right? What's outside of you. If you're bored and overwhelmed and you don't like what's going on in your life, then change the story. Change the story. Notice when people are giving you things. Notice when you do manifest something, um, whatever it can be. What is it? Oh, manifest 4 pairs of flip-flops, friends. Doot, doot, doot. Called my sister. I said, my flip-flops are blown out. You got anything? She's like, oh, let me go look in my closet. Oh, my feet never been happier. Okay. Um, so it's time. This is what we need to work on with this full moon. This idea of letting go, right? Because full moons release. Full moons are when our most psychic. Full moons to me are always releasing and bringing in at the same time. So releasing this idea that everything's outside of our reach. We're not creative. Everyone else has got it, but we don't. Okay, that needs to go. Um, and then bring in that we can work with the universe, that we are our best creators, right? That we are our super strong manifestors. Okay, sweets. We're going to leave it at that. Happy full moon in Capricorn. Decide what it is that you want to work on. Um, and really start to see if these ideas of nostalgia start coming up and really pay attention, really sit with them. And if it's really strong, ask yourself what is it that I need to bring with me with this feeling, and what is it that I need to leave behind with this feeling? Understanding just because something feels familiar doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. And just because something feels a little uncomfortable or unfamiliar doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. How Gemini can we get with that, right? Even though full moon Capricorn, stay grounded, stay focused, keep it simple, right? Earth signs like to keep things simple, um, keep things practical, right? So bring all those things in with this full moon. Okay, until next time, like and subscribe, share with your friends, all those things. Have a great full moon.